Section 15 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ted Leinhart. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book Second, The Reproductive or Representative Power. The Association of Ideas, Part 3. 2. The law of correlation, according to which, when we have discovered a relation between things, the idea of one tends to bring up the others. Attempts have been made to resolve this law into the others. I am not to enter into these subtle discussions here. It is enough for me that there is such a law, simple or complex. It is a fact that things between which a relation has been discovered suggest each other. I have classified below, page 211, the relations which the mind can discover, those 1 of identity, 2 whole and parts, 3 of resemblance, 4 of space, 5 of time, 6 of quantity, 7 of active property, 8 of cause and effect. When we have discovered any one of these relations, the objects are apt to call up each other. An object in one position calls up the same object in other circumstances. A part suggests the whole, and the whole a part. Resembling objects bring up each other as contiguous objects in space and time and quantity do. The properties and causal relations of objects are powerful bonds of association. But instead of enlarging on all these, we may illustrate a few of them in a way which will come home to the experience of everyone. Thus, like recalls like. It is the law of similarity or resemblance. I see a portrait, and immediately I think of the original. I see a boy, and I am at once reminded of his father, whose features he bears. This law brings comparisons and likenesses of every kind before us, and we delight to trace them. There are analogies which commend themselves to the minds of all, and the one object ever suggests the other. Thus we connect sunshine and prosperity, night and adversity, light and truth, darkness and error, mist and confusion, whiteness and innocence, sin and pollution, the dove and meekness, the serpent and wiliness, the lamb and gentleness, the tiger and fierceness, the fox and cunning, the dog and faithfulness, fickleness and fortune, the forest and wandering, high winds and calamities, waves and troubles, heights and hollows, with prosperity and adversity alternately succeeding each other, human life and the running stream, spring and childhood, summer and the bloom of youth, autumn and sober middle age, the fading year and declining life, old age and gray hairs with the snows of winter. Prose uses such comparisons for instruction, and poetry seizes them and brings them forth for delight. James Thomson, said Samuel Johnson, could not see these two candles without making an image out of them. The earlier poets brought out the more obvious, the broader, and more striking comparisons, and these ever come home most powerfully to the hearts of all. But these being now become commonplace, certain more modern poets, such as Keats, Tennyson, and Browning, are led to search for more subtle and recondite analogies, which affect most intensely a select few who have run through all older poetry. Poetry seeks to take advantage of all sorts of correlations, of sound and sense, of measured syllables, of rhyme, of balancings of idea and sentiment, of metaphor, simile, contrast, and comparisons of every kind. Hence it is that poetry is more easily committed to memory than prose. We have now not only the law of repetition to aid us, but the law of resemblance or correlation, the one strengthening the other, and the whole giving impetus to the stream. But this law is not confined in its influence to poetry. It aids the scientific inquirer in every branch of investigation, by often bringing together the things that are like and which should, therefore, be put into the same class or group. The botanist sees a plant. It suggests a like plant, and the species and genus to which it belongs. This law of mind within thus helps us to discover the laws of nature without us, and to make us feel that we are surrounded with objects not constructed arbitrarily, nor distributed capriciously, but fashioned after an ordained model form or type, and capable of being arranged in the most methodical manner into species and genera, and orders and kingdoms. By this corresponding law within, we are thus made to feel at home amid the varied and complicated works of nature, and to discover among these adaptations evidence of a plan and a purpose. And then resemblance is only one of many correlations which the mind is inclined to discover and to follow in its spontaneous trains. There are a number of other lines on which rails are set for it, and on which it will run if it is once placed on them. Thus it is apt to run on from effect to cause, and cause to effect, from a whole to its parts, and a part to its whole, from means to end, and end to means. On seeing an effect, the mind naturally goes after its cause. Thus, in history, we inquire what agencies God employed to effect the great Reformation in the 16th century. What causes produced the French Revolution of 1790? What influence made the people demand the Reform Bill in England in 1830? And we would seek to determine what are the causes that produce the special forms of immorality which disgrace our country. And again, when we see a powerful set of agencies at work, we inquire what will be their effect. What, for instance, must be the issue of the abolition of slavery in America? In science, Newton inquired what draws a stone to the ground, and found it to be the same gravitation as keeps the moon in her sphere. And there are persons asking what keeps up the sun's light, and they think it is a shower of bodies which run round him, and as they ever come nearer dash into his atmosphere and strike light and heat. Thus it is that when we fall in with a complex object, we are inclined to resolve it into its parts, and when we see an ingenious machine, to find out what is its use. We need not illustrate this farther. All philosophy and all science are illustrations of relations of some kind, of class or cause, of parts and whole, or means and end, and minds of a philosophic or scientific character are exercised in discovering these relations, which are the relations that bind nature together, and all persons gifted with high intellect delight to pursue and follow such relations as they are unfolded to us through all the works of the great Creator. Thus, too, we like to have essays, sermons, lectures, speeches, not disjointed and leaping abruptly from one topic to a distant one, but, on the contrary, having all the parts connected by a relation of some kind, and all the sentences leading gracefully the one to the other. And when this is done, our thoughts follow the train more pleasantly, and we find that by means of the ties thus supplied, we can, with less difficulty, call when we place all the topics back into our memory. It should be observed that as the result of the working of the laws of coexistence and correlation, our ideas are apt to come up in groups, at times to annoy us by collecting a troublesome crowd, more frequently to help us by calling in the powers which enable us to accomplish our ends, which we now do as if by instinct. It is by such high relations that the ideas of minds of the higher sort are knit together, and their thoughts, instead of running like those of commonplace minds in the same track, or bringing together the things that have coexisted before, go after analogies and causes and consequences and analysis and uses, and bring illustrations and proofs and confirmation from remote regions. The memory that proceeds by correlation is much higher in kind than that which follows mere repetition and coexistence. It has often been said that a powerful memory is seldom associated with a strong judgment. This is so far a mistake. In order to ascertain the exact truth, we must distinguish between two kinds of memory: the memory that goes by repetition and coexistence, and the memory that pursues resemblances and causes and other intellectual relations. A memory that excels only in repeating may certainly exist without any high powers of judgment or reason. There have been extraordinary instances recorded of this repeating memory. The story told of a man employed by Frederick of Prussia to repeat a poem of Voltaire on once hearing it is rather amusing. Voltaire was to read to the king a poem of considerable length, which he had just composed. After he had finished reading, the king remarked dryly, "That poem is stolen. I have heard it before." "That is impossible," said the poet. Whereupon Frederick said he would prove it, and immediately sent for a man who, to the great confusion of Voltaire, repeated the poem word for word. The person had been placed behind a screen, and from once hearing the poem was able to repeat it correctly. But this memory is, after all, the child's memory, which goes by repeating the same, or striking off after the topics that have been together in its mind before. It is not the memory of the man intellectually advanced, which will not follow the one straight line, because it has many other lines alluring it, which will not spring up straight like the stalk of grass or the reed, but goes off ramified like the tree in multiplied branches and branchlets of varied curvature, covered all over with graceful foliage. It is not the memory of the historian, the memory of the poet, the memory of the man of science, all of which proceed by correlation and bring in facts and images and generalizations from the past and the distant, as well as from the present and the near, from the real and from the ideal, from earth and from heaven, to instruct by their truthfulness, to please by their beauty, to strike by their novelty, or to combine the scattered works of God in a sublime unity, illustrative of the one great creative mind. A memory which thus gathers in from such varied quarters is ever associated with, as indeed it proceeds from, a powerful understanding. End of section 15.